Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you all have had a good week. So feedback has been returned on all of the stage one assignments. So please make sure that you check that out and use that as you create your final draft. So I'm going to talk a bit about some things that I saw, sort of overall trends. I mean, everybody got comments on their documents, certainly, but there were a few things that I wanted to cover as you all get ready to wrap up these assignments. So, you all turned in a summary and an analysis. So, you have to, of course, revise those and add your introduction and your evaluation paragraphs. Now, your introduction should include the title of the article, the authors who wrote it, the publication where it was found, and you should include a thesis statement about whether the article successfully reaches its audience. If you already put that information in your summary, you can just move it from the summary paragraph up into the introduction. You don't need to repeat it. So you may be wondering, how do I get the reader into this essay? How should I introduce the essay? And of course, there's no one right way to create an introduction. You could, briefly introduce the topic of the article. Remember, this is not a topical essay, so you don't want to get too far into that. Or maybe you could talk about issues of research and credibility and use that to lead the reader into where you introduce your article and create your thesis statement. Just some things overall. Remember that the title of the article is not the title of your essay. Okay, you could certainly make your title something like an analysis of, and then the title that they use in quotation marks, but you shouldn't just title your essay the same thing as the title of the article you're working with. Make sure in your analysis that you include quotations, examples from that text to support your points. Also remember, when quoting, you need to anchor the quote in your sentence. A quotation should not be alone in a sentence. So, so-and-so says, and then your quote. For example, the author writes, and then your quote. And remember to cite. Most of these articles do have authors and page numbers, and the author's last name and page number are what you need in the in-text citation for MLA. If you run into some special cases with quoting, perhaps I told you need an indirect citation. That's where you are quoting where the article quoted someone else, or something else. There is a special quoting example file in our Blackboard site, so certainly check that out, especially if I indicated that you are working with indirect citations. We are working on keeping our writing formal and academic, so you want to avoid I, you, we statements where they are unnecessary. And lop off those I thinks, I feels, I believes, in my opinions at the beginning of the sentences. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be making an argument here, but if you take off the I think or the I feel, it makes your statement a lot stronger. So, if you ask me, did I do well on this essay? And I said, I think you did well on this essay versus you did well on this essay, the second version sounds a lot stronger, right? So then some issues with the analysis. So first of all, the subject of the article is not necessarily the audience. For example, if you are working with an article that's dealing with a study on teenagers, that does not mean that teenagers are reading this article. Remember that scholarly articles are directed to an audience who is familiar with the field, educated in it. You're typically going to see elevated language, not the sort of things that would engage a high schooler, for example, typically speaking. Not to say that you all are not engaged with your scholarly articles. On that note, please make sure you thoroughly read the articles. I could tell with some of the summaries, some of you just read the abstract and wrote your summary and made some stabs at analysis. You do have to read the article, okay? So pay attention to who the audience is. And, there are going to be some outliers. There will be some scholarly articles that are geared toward a general audience. And if you are working with an example of that, that is a point you really need to tackle. And you need to use some examples from the text to back that point. As you are writing, make sure you are careful with pronouns. If you say it, make sure it's clear what it is that you're referring to. If you use this, make sure there is a noun following this to tell us what this is. Otherwise, writing can get unclear in a hurry. And something else I noticed was that a lot of these analysis paragraphs, especially, were essentially just the answers to the questions that I asked strung together. So that's not really writing. Like, I gave you those questions to get you started, but you do need to actually construct a paragraph. You need transitions. You need to quote from the text and provide examples. You can't just answer the questions and walk away. You do need to work with this a bit. So remember that you will conclude this essay with an evaluation discussing how well the article reaches its intended audience. And you know, some of you have already started working on that, maybe made points that they could reach an audience beyond what they were reaching for, and that's great. That's perfectly good information to include. So remember that you do need to cite. You should have a works cited page with an MLA formatted works cited entry. Many of you have already done that and done it well. If there were problems with what you did, I did let you know. Though for those of you who did not include it, I mean, I didn't have anything to give you feedback on there. In your in-text citations, typically it's going to be the author's last name and the page number. If you have more than 3 authors, you would use et al, et period space al, with the first author's last name instead of listing, you know, the 15 that all work together to write this article. So it would just be the author's last name, the page number, in the parentheses. There's no period, no comma between, no p period, none of that. And the period to the sentence goes after the citation. Yes. Article titles should be in quotation marks. The name of the publication, so you know, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that would be italicized. An easy way to remember that is the larger work is italicized, the parts of the work are in quotation marks. So a newspaper, the Sanford Herald, that would be italicized. The title of an article that appeared in the Sanford Herald would go in quotation marks. Remember that your works cited page is a page all on its own, and in order to get that on another page and ensure it stays there, use a page break. A really quick way to do that is Control Enter. Otherwise, if you just try to hit Enter until it goes down to the next page, every time you revise your document, it's going to move that. So just having the page break in there makes it a lot easier. If you are still having some spacing issues, if I'm telling you that your spacing between line breaks or paragraph breaks is off, if you select all in Word and go to the line spacing button and select line spacing options, make sure your space before and space after are both set to 0 and the document is set to be double spaced. And the last thing I wanted to mention, I meant to talk about this in last week's video, but I got carried away. But I think I'm carried away now because I see we're over the 7-minute mark. I really enjoyed your discussion board post about mother tongue, and y'all, a lot of you made really great points, and most of them are reasons that I wanted you all to read that essay. She addresses a myriad of issues, certainly how we judge people based on the way they communicate, how, you know, standardized testing can stifle creativity, how often instead of having their skills built, students are automatically kind of funneled into this or that program because they seem to have a talent or a natural aptitude for something. And another message that I really want to make sure you all take away, the way you communicate is something that's very personal to you, right? Where we are from plays into this, the way our families speak, the way we speak to our friends. A lot of you are familiar with the concept of code switching, which is when we change the way we communicate based on the audience that we're communicating with. It's often an unconscious act, but sometimes we're very conscious of it. And something I want you to know, so my goal here is to help you write in standard English. I want you to be able to turn this on when you've got essays, when you've got resumes, cover letters, job interviews. I'm not out to change the way you communicate as a human being, okay? I'm not out to try to get you not to talk the way you talk to your family and not to talk the way you do to your friends. And I also want you to know that grammatical errors are not an indication of intelligence. I think we all know that, but sometimes we need to be reminded of it. And I never want you to take it personally when I give you critical feedback on your work, okay? I am trying to help you, and it is not a value judgment from me. I don't look at that and go, oh man, comma splices, this person's ideas are not worthy. No, absolutely not. But the rest of the world, some people think that way, and that's why it's important for us to do the best we can with standard English, with writing formally, writing on a college level, writing on a workplace appropriate level, so that you don't fall prey to the kind of judgments that Amy Tan's mother did. And you all shared some great stories, some of them heartbreaking, about your experiences with stories like hers. That video is much longer than I planned. Sorry about that. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Remember that I extended the deadline just for the essay to Tuesday afternoon because it took me until today to get all of the feedback back to everybody, including the people who submitted late. Very sorry it took so long. Also, for our future essays and other assignments, just make sure you follow instructions really carefully and submit items to the proper places, and that will help things move along. I had a whole lot of email and a whole lot of resetting assignments last week, and that definitely made me grade a bit more slowly. I had planned to have the work that you've just gotten back, some of you, back to everybody on Wednesday. So hopefully next week's essays will be smoother. We've done this before, and I'll be able to get them back to you soon. So I hope y'all have a great weekend. If you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email or give me a call, and I will be back with another video next week.